travelers, and welcome to Versus Stars Podcast third season. Hi, my loyal listeners. Thank you for your continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is an amazing episode because Sarah Gailey boards the mothership. You know her as the writer of White Widow from Marvel Comics. Now, come on board as we go traversing the stars. Oh, Miss Gailey, thanks so much for coming to Versus Stars Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, my pleasure. So, we start off with a question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love for writing and who your earliest influences?
Oh my goodness. My love for writing was probably inspired by my childhood growing up in libraries and independent bookstores. My mom worked at an independent bookstore when I was growing up, and I grew up in like the back room of the bookstore. She would just put me back there and I would rummage through all the advanced copies and stuff. And I just really grew up surrounded by books and understanding the effect that they can have on the world. My earliest influence, easily this book called what's it called? It's called The Big Bear and the Red Ripe Strawberry, I think. And it's about a little mouse who has a perfect red ripe strawberry, and he's sure that a big hungry bear is going to come take it away from him. I probably read that about 800 times, and frankly, the narrative arc of that book, it's so tense, and it's so they really get in your head. It's a psychological thriller. I think that really put me on the path I am today.
So, are you still reading that book, or that 800 times when you were little?
I'm still reading it because I have little nieces.
Yeah.
And I have so many friends who have babies, and every time a kid reaches the age of, will you read something to me? I'm like, you want to read a scary book? And of course they say yes, because kids love being scared.
I'm telling you, they don't make scary books and scary films like they used to. Like I remember, I grew up in the 80s, and we had some like Dark Crystal and stuff like that would actually could scare a little kid. Nowadays, it feels like it's all like nicer, like.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like when we were children, media was a lot less concerned with its responsibility to our psyches.
Yeah.
And we turned out, I'm not going to say fine, but we turned out.
Yeah, well, I mean, we survived our childhood. I mean, the world didn't burn to the ground in our adulthood. So,
yeah, we made
can you
it.
ask? We have done no worse or better than any other generations, also. So, obviously, the independent reading has done well for you because as a writer, you're a Hugo Award-winning author and a best-selling novelist. So, well done. And short story writer, too. So, congratulations. Obviously, you're an accomplished writer. So you conquered novels, you conquered short stories. Why did you decide to go conquer comic books?
I mean, I love comics. I always have. Who wouldn't? Honestly, people who don't love comics, I think, just haven't read them yet. And I was contacted by an editor at Boom Studios, who no longer works in comics. His name is Matt. He was wonderful, really brilliant and kind. And he reached out to me after reading my novella, River of Teeth, which is a pulp Western. And he wanted to know if I'd be into writing comics. And I said, I don't think I'm smart enough to write comics. I mean, comics authors are so smart in so many different levels because they're thinking about art and they're thinking about dialogue and they're thinking about narrative and they're thinking about audience all at once. And he said, we'll get you there. And gave me the incredible opportunity to write Steven Universe comics, which was writing for kids. And it was such a thrill. And also because of the kind of tightly defined nature of Steven Universe as an IP, I wasn't doing as much invention as you do with, for example, creator owned or with a looser IP, like my recent arc on Buffy. Instead, I got the opportunity to work within a pretty well-defined space in order to learn the art of writing comics. And the thing is, I don't know if I would have taken the opportunity to write any other IP at that time. But Matt said, Steven Universe. And I was like, well, I can't pass this up. And my nieces will never forgive me in a million years if I pass this up. I have to. And I'm so glad I did because I discovered that comics they might be my favorite medium to write. Don't tell my novel editor this. But the thing that no one told me going in is that comics give you an opportunity to collaborate with such a team of brilliant people. And that's my favorite thing as a creative, is getting to work with people who are so good at what they do and getting to be right alongside them instead of just in the audience and working with them and helping see every part of their process and maybe occasionally getting to steer a little piece of it with my ideas. There's nothing like it in the world.
So the thing with writing comic books, once again, having been a novelist, a short story writer, comic books are different. I'm in, I'm in the indie comic book writing world. I do, a little bit, obviously not where you are, but a little bit the indie world, and is a different mindset in the world of comic books, especially when you approach it as a writer. So when you're developing your story, assuming you're writing full scripts, or you're doing, you're not doing like the Marvel method. You're doing full script.
No, and even in my writing for Marvel, I burden them with incredibly full scripts.
Okay, so how are you thinking differently about a comic book than you would about your short stories or your novel, about how you're actually approaching the writing and developing of that story?
Oh, entirely different. Entirely different. When I write in prose, the way I think of it is that as an author, I am having a conversation with the story to inform the conversation the audience will have with the story. So it's not a conversation between the audience and me. Once the story is written, I have no control over the conversation the audience has with it. But I'm basically like trying to coach the story on what conversation to have with the audience. I'm like, okay, go out there and tell them that, they shouldn't abuse their children or whatever. And in comics, I'm having a conversation with the artist, the flatter, the colorist, and the letterer, and even the interiors designer when you get to trades. Like I'm having this conversation with the whole team about what conversation we're going to have with the audience. It's so different. I'm when I write a script, the way I write my scripts is as a conversation with each member of the team. So I'll put a note in my script that's like, hey, colorist, what do you think about, first of all, what do you think we should do here? Or I want to do this. Is that possible? Or I have no idea what to do here. I trust your judgment. And I do that with each member of the team in my scripts increasingly, especially as I work with members of the team for longer. When I just started writing White Widow for Marvel with artist Alessandro Miracolo and colorist Matt Mia, who are both phenomenal. And, in the first script that I wrote for Alessandro, I was being a lot more careful. I was being a lot more descriptive. I was being a lot more like, here's every single idea laid out, because I hadn't talked to Alessandro a lot. And then we started having more conversations. I started being like, what are your preferences? So in my most recent script, I got to say, I want a 2-page action scene here. Here's everything I need to have happen in the action scene. You draw it and then give it to me, and I'll figure out the sound effects and the dialogue for these 2 pages, because I know that Alessandro loves drawing action and can picture entire huge action sequences in his mind perfectly. And so what I picture and write down could be in competition with his genius for that work. But it's a conversation between the whole team, and then as a team we assemble the conversation that we want the piece to have with the audience and then send it out from there.
So when you're a novelist, right, it's 100% your baby, right? You're the sole parent of this thing coming into the world. As a comic book writer, you can't be. Was it a difficult thing to accept that other people could potentially override what you're thinking? Was it a tough thing to be like, here's my baby, raise it for the next couple of months by yourself, that kind of thing?
You know what? The only difficult part of that was something that I think very few people talk about in terms of this transition, which is learning how not to be an asshole.
I'm still learning that trick.
The thing is like dogs and cats, like how the way that a cat says I'm angry is to lash its tail back and forth, and the way a dog says I'm happy is to wag its tail back and forth.
Yeah.
I think the same thing is true when it comes to novel creative circles and publicity and marketing, especially, and comic creative circles and marketing and publicity. In novels, the most courteous thing you can do as an author is say, this book is 100% mine. Anything you don't like about it is my fault. And sure, you get a bunch of credit because people are like, here's the things I like about it. Those are all you too. But you are taking the responsibility for the novel and for selling it. If you do a good job selling the novel, you get the blame. In the world of novels, the publisher will say, you did a bad job. You don't get to write anymore. This isn't your job anymore. In comics, it's completely opposite. The most courteous thing you can do as a writer is make sure that you are highlighting your whole team and saying, all of us are responsible for this. All of us should get the credit for it. Here's what every individual person did, appreciate their role, and really highlighting everybody's work. And when I first came into comics, I sat down with two different comics friends of mine, a writer and an artist, and with an agent friend of mine who represents a lot of comics creators. And I said, okay, tell me how not to screw up. Tell me, like, what's polite? Who do you credit on the team? Who do you leave out of the conversation so that, the audience doesn't come to them when they get mad? Especially given the way that certain comics fans can be incredibly communicative about their displeasure.
Well said.
Like,
very politely stated. Good job.
And they all gave me as many tips as they could. And even then, I messed some stuff up. I didn't know how much communication is appropriate between author and artist. I didn't know when I might be bothering someone and making them feel that I'm interfering in their process versus when it would be good for us to have an open line of communication so that everyone is getting treated fairly on the team. And that was the hard part. Giving up control was not hard, but knowing, and especially knowing now in hindsight, that I made some mistakes early on in like not being as communicative with my artist as they might have liked. Which I don't know, maybe my artists were happy to not be hearing from a newbie who didn't know what they were talking about. But that's the tough part.
So how long did it take you to not be an asshole?
It depends on who you ask. Maybe they'll think that the answer is never. I think the thing that really made me fully not an asshole was getting to work with Liana Kangas on Know Your Station. Because in my work on Eat the Rich, which is my previous creator-owned series, my editor was doing a lot of the communication with my artist, which I suspect was for the protection of the artist, because my editor knew that I didn't know anything about anything. It was like, the artist does not need your opinions on any of this stuff. But in going into Know Your Station, I had worked on Steven Universe, on Eat the Rich, and on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I felt like, okay, I know what I'm doing enough to know that I want to be checking in with my artist to make sure they're being treated fairly. I trust my editor, I trust my publisher as much as you can trust any business relationship, but also I have a responsibility here. So let me be in touch with my team. And I got in touch with Liana. It was the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. I said, I'm so sorry to bother you. I just want to make sure that as we negotiate this contract, that you're being treated fairly. Let's be in touch. And we ended up talking about art. Liana ended up teaching me so much about the comics process, about the role that every person on the team has, because my stance is usually, you're an expert in what you do. I'm not going to interfere, but that prevents me from learning sometimes. And Liana was like, here's exactly what each person does. And here's how your work as the writer can prevent that step in the process from sucking. Like here's what you need to do to set up your flatter for success in your script. Here's what you need to do to make it so that your letterer has all the information that they need. And then even from there, Liana has taught me so much about just the industry, the politics of the industry, the movements of different dynamics and different studios. And that amount of learning and education and friendship has made me so much better as a comics creator. Can't overstate it.
So the one thing, as you mentioned about the World of Comics, is that you get, well, so when you're writing for an IP, or a character like White Widow from Marvel or anything like that, unlike when writing your own novel, you have a set audience already waiting for this thing to come out because they know the characters. On the one hand, automatically you have an audience base. It's right there. All you have to do is publish it, and some of them are going to read it. On the other hand, they're already a fan base, and they're going to have a very strong opinion about things that may be different than when you're writing your own novel and it's a brand new creation. What are some of the pluses and minuses of being in that situation?
I mean, you really just named it. I love the fan bases of the properties I've written for. Steven Universe fan base is incredible. It's across ages, it's across countries. and Steven Universe readers are very kind. Buffy fan base, deep fandom. Like the fandom thoughts and opinions are so entrenched, and there's a whole language that is I would say close to as established as like a Star Trek fandom. Um, Also very kind and very patient. I think because they've been through a lot as a fan base, and they're like they're like we know how bad it can be. So they've been incredibly kind and welcoming. White Widow is my first time getting to interact with the Marvel fan base. I wrote a couple of shorts. I wrote a Black Cat short for Pride anthology, and I wrote it's out now, right? Yeah, I wrote a Werewolf by Night and Hulk crossover for a Halloween special. But those aren't writing the character, right? Those are like my little tiny crumb of canon that I'm adding. And since they're both specials, like a Pride special and a Halloween special, they kind of exist in their own thing. They're like a specialty flavor.
Right.
White Widow, this has been me solo writing this character who's so beloved. And there's a couple of branches of the fan base, and there's a branch of the fan base who feels that I'm doing a terrible job. There's a branch of the fan base who feels that I'm doing an awesome job. And it's difficult, right? It's difficult to like get tagged in posts that say you're ruining this character. And at the same time, I don't think you can ruin a character. I think that a character can grow, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do with Yelena, is allow her to grow in her own right and into her own person. And if that disagrees with the person she's been in the past, then it disagrees. We contain multitudes. And I think that what matters most is that even the fans who hate new stuff and who hate, what I'm doing with this character, hate it because they love the character. They love the stories that she's been in. They love the person who she is to them. And even if they're not a fan of what I'm doing, I think it's incredible that I get to be involved in a character who is so important to so many people. Like that's amazing.
See what that's what I think what I never said about comic book anger, especially nowadays in like Marvel and DC, things of that nature. If you don't like what's being done to a character, wait a year or two. They're relaunch the book anyway. Don't worry about it. You can just hold on. Don't get. I wouldn't freak out about it. Like I said, in another cycle or two, it's going to be changed anyway. You can calm down.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing, right? Every new take on a character is a different facet of a huge gem. And this facet might not be your favorite facet. That's okay. The character contains so many pieces of themselves, and that's why so many people connect with and love them.
So when you're writing for Yelena, there's an audience that probably knows the character very well from comic books. My experience with Yelena came from the movies, Black Widow and then Hawkeye. When you're thinking about Yelena, how much of each one finds their way into your voice for the character, and how much was there discussion when you got the job to move it towards a little bit what the movie brought to the character and how much the comic books brought to the character and things of that nature?
So Marvel did not tell me go MCU or go comics. I got the entire backlog of comics, read them. I did watch the movies and the Hawkeye episodes that she was in to get the flavor of the MCU, because I wanted to get the full canon of the character. I know that there are people who disagree about what enters canon, but as far as I know, as far as the Marvel Corporation is concerned, everything can count. So I'm being hired by the Marvel Corporation. I want to know everything that they want me to know. The conversation we had about direction had a few main pieces. One of them was that Yelena needed to be a character in her own right. She needed to be establishing herself. And as someone who has experience in establishing myself after a lot of life upheaval, I know that involves a period of total reinvention. We established that we wanted the rating of the comic to make it accessible for slightly younger readers. So we weren't going to go for a the top rating is at a mature. We wanted to go a little more accessible so that, if older teens wanted to pick this up, we wouldn't be getting angry letters from their parents, which did mean scaling down some of these more explicitly like sexual exploitation aspects of some of her backstory. We also discussed wanting to bring humor into the series. I, in my comics writing, really like humor. I like to be fun and funny, and I like for my characters to bring a sense of humor even to incredibly dark situations. And that was important to me, and I said, I want to make sure, that's okay. The final piece we discussed, of course, is Yelena's personal history with the country of Russia. At the time that I was pitching this, there were some pretty intense conversations happening around some of Russia's activities as a country. And my perspective on this was that I was not willing to write a comic that seemed to excuse or condone those activities. And Marvel gave me, no pushback on that. It was, we want this character to be a character in her own right. And also in her comics, she frequently says that she doesn't support powers, right? She doesn't support oligarchs. She supports people. And so those are the perspectives that we talked about bringing into this comic. And what I hope I have managed to, I think a lot of people have seen the sense of humor that I really enjoy bringing into comics in this comic and have said this reads a little MCU, which is fine. A lot of Yelena fans are coming from the MCU. If they feel welcomed by that humor, that's great. But I do also think that characters who have been through an immense amount of trauma and personal turmoil are entitled to make some jokes. And I'm saying that from so much personal experience.
Well, the interesting about Yelena, so she's an assassin. She's definitely a killer because that's what assassins do. They don't, that's by within the definition of the word assassin is killer. However, in the first issue blurb, that's the first issue's out. I don't have the second issue out yet. The first issue's the only one out. The blurb about the character at the very beginning of the story describes her as a hero. So between assassin and hero, which description is closest to how you envision the character?
It's so interesting because I deeply love and appreciate every single person in comics sales and marketing and comics copywriting. They're the ones who make it so that these stories end up in the hands of readers. And I have no expertise in that area. Their decision to describe Yelena as a hero in her own right, I'm sure, is a very considered opinion or a very considered decision that moves Yelena's comics into the hands of the readers who will connect with this story best. That said, I am a very cranky queer, and I do not buy into ideas of heroes versus villains. I think that everyone is everything to everyone at certain points in their lives. I don't think that assassin negates hero. I also don't think that hero is a word that I would use to describe anyone in my life or in my writing, which is a controversial statement for someone writing for a heroes and villains outfit like Marvel. I would never contradict them calling people heroes and villains, but I would call Yelena an assassin first. And if things that she does in her line of work happen to make people think of her as a hero, then I'm sure she'll be flattered.
So, in your opinion, Yelena, she would view herself as more of an assassin or more of a hero, or does she not think of those terms either?
I think she thinks of herself as an assassin with great pride. I think if someone calls her a hero, she'll probably say, "Who are you and why are you talking to me?" And I think if someone calls her a villain, she'll say, "Why aren't you dead yet?"
Well, like I said, it's very interesting that she starts off in the first issue going against Captain America, who is, in the world of comic books, at least in Marvel, the stereotype hero. And she has some great dialogue with him, some good humor with him as well. How does she feel that someone like him is at odds with her? How does that define or pigeonhole her when that's the person that she's now fighting?
First of all, can I just tell you how fun that scene was to write? I I in this four issue mini, we want to anchor Yelena as to where she stands in the broader Marvel universe. What's her relationship with other people who you might be familiar with from other comics? And getting to write her encountering Captain America, who I love very much as a character. I I adore him on many, many, many levels. Um, and also Elena as a character has no respect for him. She doesn't respect the institution of Captain America at all. She thinks that anyone she's in a fight against, she can beat and also clown on. It was such a it was like roasting a beloved friend to get to write her exchange with Captain America. Um, and I think it positions her pretty perfectly, this fight with him, because she's not fighting him out of a sense of wanting to destroy what he stands for. She's fighting him because he's in her way as she's trying to assassinate somebody. Her priority is assassination. If she met him on the street, she'd probably be like, he's just some guy, okay. She's also not threatened by him. She's not threatened by greatness. She doesn't stand in awe of anything or anybody because she's seen what institutions can become and she sees no need to be loyal to them just because they're so well established.
So the other interesting about Yelena, though, is that as the story opens, she has a mentee, um, Marta, Martha,
Martha.
Marta. So I'm really bad with names. So that's my best effort. That's my best effort. So being an assassin on the whole, as far as I know, I mean, I've never been an assassin, so I'm just guessing. From
Likely story.
they're not known for being family types or those who have, well, at least an extended family. It's not like you have an assassin bat family. You know what I'm saying? It means that usually
Right.
how those things are going to run.
Although I would love to see an assassin bat family.
So, how knowing what she's done and how she was kind of brought up, how equipped is Elena to be an effective mentor to someone? And I'm gonna add one more thing. And given that she's also at the point of her life where she's in this self-discovery mode, how again in that as well equipped to tell somebody else what to do in their life right now?
I love this question because it raises the question, what qualifies anyone to be a mentor? I've been in a formal mentorship position a few times in my life, and at no point did I feel equipped. At no point did I feel qualified. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Um, but really, part of the story of this four-issue arc is of Helena deciding that what she needs to do is use her incredible skill to help people in some way, even when helping people looks like murdering other people. She is deciding that even if she doesn't feel equipped or she doesn't necessarily feel intrinsic motivation to help people, she's deciding that she might have some responsibility to. With Martha, this is Yelena trying to be a mentor, but having no idea how, being very ill equipped. There's a reason that teachers go through training for how to teach. There's a reason that pedagogy is a field of study. And it's because it doesn't come naturally. It's not easy or simple. But Yelena is going to make the decision, has made the decision here with Martha, that she has to kind of try anyway. And that's part of the person who she wants to be, is someone who tries to be involved in other people's well-being, even though it runs counter to everything she's ever experienced in her life.
Now, as someone who's a teacher myself, I'm actually a teacher. When you're part of the teaching is part of what defines you as well, as you're doing it. So as someone who's discovering herself, how much is she intentionally attempting to add that to how she will define herself.
Attempting to add being a teacher.
A teacher, a mentor, someone who, at the very least, has a group that she's trying to care about. I assume on some level, and trying to intentionally make that part of who she's going to become.
It's a central pillar of the person she's trying to build. Yelena is building an entire new self from scratch, and she's trying to have relationships with other people, but she's kind of a feral person. She doesn't know how to have relationships with other people that aren't based in pain and fear and abandonment. And she's saying to herself, I am going to be a good neighbor. I'm going to be a good friend. She doesn't know what that means, but she's determined to figure it out. And if there's anyone who can figure out something that's hard to figure out, it's going to be Yelena.
So another person that she's building a relationship with is a character named Zelda. Now,
Zelda, heart of my heart.
Now, as far as I can tell, Zelda's not an assassin. She's not part of that world whatsoever. Why is Zelda important for Yelena to kind of develop a normal person side of herself?
So Zelda is an aging punk who is deeply committed to the actual ethos of the punk community and punk scene. One of the core tenets of that is that authority does not garner respect or regard, and that established systems are meant to be questioned. This character is one of Yelena's neighbors, also owns a candy store in town, which frankly was just a little treat for me to write, because I got to write a full page of different kinds of candies that are based on the names of punk bands. And the thing that Zelda does for Yelena, the thing that Zelda represents in Yelena's development as a person, is an example of someone who knows how to hold all the same ideals as Yelena around distrust of authority and of systems, while also being able to care about and participate in community. Punks are the most community-oriented people you will meet. I have never gotten the same kind of immediate personal physical care as I've gotten at a punk show. I remember, I was like 16 years old, 5 feet tall, 85 pounds soaking wet, and so excited. And a mosh pit broke out directly in front of me. And this humongous man in the crowd just picked me up and put me on his shoulders and carried me away, because he was like, you'll die. And I'm just going to prevent that for you. And similar to how it is when you're getting on a New York City subway and your pass isn't working and someone just swipes you in without talking to you, punk shows are places where you will experience care that exists just because you're in community with each other. Now, punk shows also bring something else to the table that Yelena deeply needs, which is an ability to eject people who don't belong there. Fascists are not welcome at punk shows, and punks will make sure that that is known and reinforced. And Yelena is going to get to develop a sense of who does or doesn't deserve her regard and her protection, and who she does and doesn't want to kill. She is going to get to develop her own sense of morality and justice. And it's probably not going to line up with Captain America's sense of morality and justice, but it'll be inside of her. And Zelda is a huge part of that.
Now, as someone who, I've been buying comic books for over 30 years, maybe 34 years now. I've been buying comic books since I was very little, second generation comic book buyer. So there's certain trends that seem to exist in the world of comic books. And the trends tend to be supporting characters often die. Now, is she being set up, or is Zelda going to be looking at a character being developed to be a permanent part of this character's growth and cast?
Is it a spoiler for me to discuss this? I don't think so. I'm just going to go with it's not a spoiler. Zelda is being set up to be a part of Yelena's supporting cast in Yelena's life. Very important to me is that Yelena's development can't happen in a vacuum, just like anybody all of us heal and grow in relationship with other people. And so Yelena is getting to know a cast of supporting characters who are going to be there for her and with her if she decides to let them.
Like I said, I think it's a nice sigh of relief for everybody who's read comics. Because, like I said, usually when you're like, "Uh oh, that character is too alike," that character's screwed. It tends to be how these things tend to go. The other part of this is that other group that were introduced in the story is this organization called Armament. Um, Armament just happens to have selected the neighborhood that Yelena is living in, and so is Zelda. Is this an accident? Is this somewhere intentional? Is there where's the connection between these two events happening?
It is a total coincidence that Armament has selected the town where Yelena lives. I can't tell you anything else beyond that. I'm sorry. I would love to, but I can't.
Trent, is it an accident that Marte becomes involved with Armament? And that's connected to Yelena as well.
I would say that it's the kind of accident that many of us have encountered in our lives. It's an accident that occurs because a lot of things inside of tight-knit communities are connected. The same way that a beloved person of mine came up in their teens living in a punk house in Illinois. And 20 years later, I was talking to a new friend and they mentioned that same punk house. And it just so happens to be because we run in the same circles of an enormous but very tiny community. And that's the same kind of coincidence that causes Marta to become involved with Armament.
Now, you said this is only a 4-issue miniseries. Is the 4-issue miniseries of the promise of more, or is the 4-issue miniseries and done?
I think that likely depends on how many comics people buy. The conversations that I've had with Marvel have been about the 4-issue miniseries with a potential for ongoing that depends on a lot of factors. And I'm just going out on a limb and guessing that one of the pretty big factors is sales numbers, based on
The fact that it's not an altruistic company.
Yeah, I don't think that they're running a nonprofit to support me personally as a writer. I'm sure also there is some basis for ongoing based on, how the story lands. I have written this 4-issue mini to be self-contained. My goal in it was to create a hallway with a lot of doors in it. And if Marvel says those doors need to remain closed, it's still a perfectly pleasing hallway to walk down. However, if we get the opportunity to open some doors, there are a whole lot of doors that we can open.
So what can our listeners look forward to in upcoming issues of White Widow?
I'm trying to figure out how to answer this without giving too much away. I can say...
Oh, exclusives are fine.
Readers can look forward to a huge amount of action, a lot of background gags and panels. It's my favorite thing to write, and I just got more self-indulgent about them as we went on. And a very firm stance from me on an issue that is facing a lot of comics artists today and a lot of creative people across industries today, very clearly articulated in the final issue.
All right, that sounds awesome. Like I said, actually, what's next for you?
Oh gosh, I'm embargoed. Oh, this is so frustrating not to be able to share.
No one is listening.
The thing that is next for me is White Widow issue 2, which I hope that readers will pick up everywhere comics are sold. And the second there's anything else next for me that I'm in a position to discuss, I will come back on your show.
Definitely, please do. Please come back on the show. Like I said, however, you're also welcome to get yourself into all sorts of trouble by reviewing it on my show as a one-time exclusive that I will announce.
I think everyone will be so happy with me if I do that.
Well, Ms. Gailey, it's been
Thank you so much. pleasure.